No fuel, no flight. A practice run on the ground, signed off as non-hazardous, and in seconds 3 astronauts were dead, trapped behind a door that the fire itself sealed shut. It was supposed to be the safest day of the program. No fuel in the rocket, no launch, just 3 men sealed in a capsule on the ground, rehearsing a flight that was still weeks away. By 6:31 that evening, all 3 were gone. This is the Apollo 1 fire, the first fatal disaster of the United States space program, and almost everything that killed them had been quietly accepted as acceptable risk. To understand how a test with no fuel could kill them, you have to understand what they were sealed inside of and the deadline that put them there. America had promised to land men on the moon before the end of the decade. That schedule had become a kind of gravity, bending every decision around it, including how dangerous a test was allowed to be. The crew was 3. Gus Grissom, the command pilot, one of the original Mercury astronauts, Ed White, the first American to walk in space, and Roger Chaffee, the rookie, still waiting on his very first space flight. He would never get it. That night's exercise was called a plugs out test. The capsule was switched to its own internal power, the umbilical cables feeding it from outside disconnected, the crew sealed in, everything real except the fuel and the flight. And here we meet the first of 3 decisions, each one accepted on its own. The air they would breathe was not air at all. The cabin was filled with pure oxygen, pressurized to 16.7 pounds per square inch, about 2 pounds above the pressure outside. That pressure had a purpose. It pushed the inward opening hatch outward against its seal, holding the door shut tight, a feature on this night and soon a trap. Remember that, it matters. But here is the chemistry that mattered most. In ordinary air, most of what surrounds you is inert nitrogen that does nothing but get in the way of a flame. Strip the nitrogen out, raise the pressure, and materials that merely smolder in normal air burn fast, hot, and fiercely. Things you would never call dangerous become fuel. And the cabin was full of such things. This is the second decision. Around the crew lay roughly 34 square feet of Velcro, nylon netting, foam padding, and stacks of paper checklists, far more flammable material than the rules allowed. In normal air, that clutter is harmless housekeeping. In pure oxygen at high pressure, it was a room lined with kindling, every patch of Velcro, every strip of netting primed to catch and carry a flame. A room full of fuel is only dangerous if something lights it. That brings us to the third decision, hidden beneath the floor of the cabin, the wiring. Miles of current-carrying wire ran through that small cabin, and the workmanship was not always good. Investigators later found evidence of arcing, electrical sparking in wires beneath Grissom's left-hand couch, close to the environmental control unit. At one spot, a wire had been chafed, rubbed bare of its insulation, right beside a line carrying coolant, a bare conductor, a spark waiting to happen, sat next to fuel inside a sealed tank of pure oxygen. 3 hazards, stacked, each signed off as acceptable risk. For more than 5 hours, the test dragged on, plagued by glitches, most stubbornly a communications problem. The crew grew frustrated. If they could not talk clearly across a few buildings on the ground, the worry went, how would they ever talk across the distance to the moon? It was a little after 6:30 in the evening. The countdown was nearly there. And then, in the lower left of the cabin, almost certainly from that damaged wiring, a spark. The exact point of ignition was never positively identified. The area was too thoroughly destroyed, but it began here, in the lower left corner near Grissom's couch, where the damage would prove worst of all. In ordinary air, a small fire might have been beaten out. In 16.7 pounds of pure oxygen, the flame did not start small and grow. It exploded across the cabin in seconds. Intense heat, dense black smoke, and toxic gases, including carbon monoxide. From the first sign of fire to the crew's final transmission was about 17 seconds, then silence. There was a way out, there was a hatch, and here is the cruelest part of the whole disaster. The hatch opened inward toward the crew. The same pressure meant to seal it now turned lethal. As the fire spiked the cabin's pressure, that pressure forced the heavy door harder and harder against its frame, sealing it tighter exactly when they needed it open. From inside, it was now physically impossible to open. And this hatch was never quick. It was built in 3 separate layers. Even on a calm day in calm training, opening all 3 took at least 90 seconds under ideal conditions by design, so it could not open accidentally in space. 90 seconds was the best case. The crew did not have 90 seconds. They likely had less than 30. Outside, pad technicians threw themselves at the spacecraft through heat and smoke, fighting to reach the men inside. But the layered hatch resisted even them. It took the ground crew roughly 5 minutes to get all the layers open. By then, it was long over. The crew had perished within seconds of the fire's spread, likely within the first 30. The door that took 5 minutes to open had sealed a fate decided in less than 1. The medical board was precise. The men did not die primarily of burns. The primary cause of death was asphyxiation, carbon monoxide, and toxic gases. The thermal burns contributed but were judged likely survivable. It was the air poisoned by the fire that killed them. So, how does a program aiming for the moon seal 3 men into a firebomb and call the test non-hazardous? When the review board took the spacecraft apart, they did not find a single villain. They found a chain. Pure oxygen at high pressure, a cabin packed with flammable material, live, damaged wiring, and a hatch that could not be opened fast. Acceptable risk, acceptable risk, acceptable risk. No one of these was fatal alone. Together, under the pressure of a deadline, they were a machine for killing. NASA convened the Apollo 204 review board. It traced the chain, fixed the cause, and ordered the spacecraft torn down and rebuilt. Every link that killed the crew was broken. Start with the door. The inward hatch that sealed itself shut was replaced with one that opened outward and opened in under 5 seconds rather than minutes. The flammable cabin was stripped of its fuel. Nylon and netting gave way to non-flammable materials, including a fireproof fabric called beta cloth, and the deadly pure oxygen launch atmosphere was changed to a safer mix, 60% oxygen, 40% nitrogen at sea level pressure. These were not cosmetic fixes. The brutal redesign forced by this fire is widely credited with making the later moon landings survivable at all. The fire that killed 3 men on the ground rewrote the spacecraft that carried others safely to the moon and back. The lesson is older than spaceflight, and it has never stopped being true. A combustible environment, a live ignition source, and no quick way out. Together they are lethal, and calling a rehearsal routine does not make it safe. When safety is subordinated to schedule, the hazards do not disappear. They wait and they compound until they kill. Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, a veteran, a spacewalker, and a man still waiting for his first flight, sealed inside a test that was supposed to be the safe one. They are remembered not for how they died, but for the care that their deaths finally forced into everything that came after. 3 known hazards, each judged acceptable, together fatal. That is how the margin disappears.